Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the studio this evening. Yes, I've got sound. And if you were expecting from the title some jewellery work, then I've just updated the title. I almost forgot. We're doing some pyrography this evening, and I'm doing two pieces. I'm going to try and do two pieces of pyrography. A fox on this side and a fox on this side. This is a door hanger, so I figured I'd try and do a sleeping fox and a very much awake fox, and we'll see how it goes. I'm going to see if I can do these in 2 hours. So without further ado, as they say, I shall just grab the picture that I was looking at and we shall have a go. And before I turn the pyro on, I'm going to remove that tool from being where it was. In fact, I'm going to swap tools around a little bit. Just give me a second, I am just adjusting this socket. Which was a little bit loose. There we go, that's better. Right. And I know I'm going to want perhaps that to start with. Which means I'll want it turned down, and as they say, heat them up. Now that's on that setting. So, right, the important thing is the eyes. Good evening, 84 guy. Welcome to the studio this evening. I've got roughly an outline here. I want to get the eyes. If I don't get the eyes, then I might as well give up to start with. So I am going to get the eyes in. How did your airbrushing go last night? I think you were going to do some airbrushing last night, 84 guy. Actually, I'm going to put a little bit of light on as well, because I just realised it was getting a bit dark where I am down here. So that eye is a little bit off. It's even hard to erase your own markings sometimes on this wood. Okay, it is indeed, you're right, thank you very much. Of course that was focused for this afternoon and I completely forgot to refocus it. I had to forget something, didn't I? There we go, that's about it. Yeah, I'll have a go. Let me just get a little bit of support and tip it up a little bit. You might be able to see it a bit better. I might be able to see it a bit better. Now, eyes need to be roughly in the same place, of course. Now then, we've sort of got a black outline around the eyes, so we will do that as well. Now I've got this, the heat on this tool is turned down as much as I possibly can. Well, actually it's not strictly true, but it's turned right down. As you can see, it still heats the wood really quickly. Okay, now I've got to do this other eye as well, which I obviously messed up a little bit, but when I drew it. So I'm trying my best to make as fine a line as I can here. I'm not bothered about going, because I'm using a really dark colour here. That's no problem, Fluffy Twiggler. Of course, it will be on the reply from PayPal when I send you the invoice for it. Which of course means that I need your email address. Dear. Yeah, so I've got. So what was I saying? Yeah, I have to be careful with pencil, or this I've done with a transfer paper, but to be a bit careful that if I apply pyrography over the top, it cooks it into the pyrography. So I've got to be a little bit careful where I do it. If I'm going over with a dark line, then it's not a problem. Like I've just outlined the eyes there, and the nose will be quite dark as well. I think if you were to start sending enough old artwork and books, then it would probably cost you more in postage and packing, Fluffy Twiggler. But I appreciate you. I really do appreciate your enthusiasm for the piece. At the moment, I probably will hang it on the wall for a while, because I'm quite pleased with that one, and it certainly is worthy of being hung on the wall. With the amount of hours in it, I'd want to sell it for a sort of a reasonably commercial price. Otherwise, it gets really it's kind of devaluing if you don't mind me putting it that way, and that is something I don't ideally want to do. No, I haven't, Fall Guy. What I've done is make it a little bit larger, rearrange the screen a little bit, and cropped the image square, and I've cropped the main cam a little bit as well, because generally speaking it's working in the main screen. I'm just playing about a bit with the layout and seeing you know how things work. Yeah, same camera though. It is just because it's larger. Fluffy Twiggler, thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. I mean, obviously everyone likes it when somebody else says they like what they've done, but I kind of do appreciate that. Artists, and you know, you're probably aware of it yourself, do tend to think everything that they do isn't quite as good as it could be. So having someone else say, "Ah, that's great," is always nice. Boosts the ego somewhat, but no, my head still isn't filling the frame. Carry on. It might get a bit bigger. Now, if I could actually zoom that camera, I'd have fun by just zooming in a little bit, but I can't. That's a fixed camera. Is that okay? I've set myself 2 hours to do this, so I'm going to try and see if I can stick to doing this door hanger in 2 hours. So that's both sides. So it's going to be an interesting sort of challenge to see if I can do it. So tonight I have to remember to yeah, no, I understand what you mean. It's easy enough. You always think it's worse, but it is something that I've kind of learned. You, as artists, we're all super critical about what we do. No, it will be a lot more pleasant if you guys do type. Don't do that. It's just me. I have to remember. I do. You are at liberty to remind me if I spend, like I'm doing now, not working, looking at the camera and answering comments, to sort of say, go on with it. So let's, yeah. I mean, this will end up somewhat stylized, of course, because it would be really nice to do things like fur texture, but that will take a lot more time than I've got. So this is something completely new for me. Applying a time box, technical talk there. Applying a time limit to what I'm doing. So, whilst actually technically, if I don't finish it in the time, then I'm just going to finish it anyway. But the idea is to try and do it in, as I say, in an hour. Right, dark outline there, right. Okay, so switch now to the, no, of course that tool doesn't fit that very well. Gotta be careful with that. Switch over. This tool needs at least a setting of 4. Okay, inside the ears. So I will mark where the ears are and then I will erase the lines around the ears. Like that, and yeah. Like that, and then flip so I can work on the other side. Okay, that's going to want to be scraped, so like that, yeah, let's put them, just go over the top there. Face is about down to there. Cheekbone about there, okay, about there. So just an outline with a pen, that needs to come down further to about there. So outline it with a little bit of heat. That way then I can erase that line. And I knew it would do that. Where's my paintbrush? There we go. You're wondering what I'm doing with the brush, or why I'm doing it with the brush. Whether I've done it using transfer or a pencil, in this case it's transfer, but the colour of the transfer actually gets into the grain when you use an eraser on it, if you're not careful. And I've got a little bit around here. You push the colour into the grain, and you get a smudge, basically a dark smudge, which shows up if you're not very careful. So it's a case of brush over it, erase over it once, brush it away, and again, so that you don't get you don't push the colour in. Right. So now then. Ears actually slightly larger than I marked, so that's something we will just extend this line down. Come on. Because when I mark the heat with the heat to replace the outline that was on the wood, I went inside the lines so that I didn't cover them, which meant that the image would end up very slightly small and possibly out of proportion. So I just needed to remember that I had to go over the line. Now, you've all gone quiet now to encourage me to get on with this, have you? Well, I guess this is the closest we'll get to seeing speed pyrography. And the inside of the ears is dark. Yeah. Now my intention is to get the scalpel out and scrape the hairs in. But since I'm going to need to scrape right up to the edge of the ear, there's no point in going too close to the edge of the inner edge of the ear, because I'll just end up scraping it back out again. That comes a little bit lower, like that. Right up to that tip of that ear there. I just need to turn this round. It always helps if you're doing an arc, which is roughly what I was trying to do there, to go in the angle that your wrist normally twists in. You'll get a lot smoother arc and curve by doing that than you would by trying to do it against the angle of your arm movement. Now normally when I'm doing these sorts of things, I try and establish an overall colour for everything first, and then set tones afterwards, so darken areas down after establishing a complete tone, but that will take a lot longer to do, and I've already spent about 20 minutes doing this. 15 minutes. So I kind of need to go for colour, final colour or close to final colour straight away. Don't have time to really to come back afterwards. I want to try and get everything first go. That'll do, and then I still want to be able to see the edge of the ear, so I'm going to scrape it. What I'm going to do is apply a little bit of colour around the edge there, and just a light tone in there to scrape against, like that, and we'll see about that a little bit more later. Now do the same on this side. So establish the edge of the ear is around there. Apply a little bit of colour. I will be scraping that area around here, so I'm scraping quite a bit of the colour away. Lots of hairs just in that area. Then we go quite dark around here, yeah. So the inner ear, quite a dark colour. Obviously not a lot of light gets into the inner ear. Max out the cake, good evening. Okay, 84 guy, fair enough. Graya, good evening, welcome to you. And Max out the cake, yes I have. I finished the elephant last night. What we're doing now is a very quick bit of pyrography. I've got an hour to finish this. Fox on this side, and I've got a sleeping fox on the other side, which I have another hour to finish. So I'm trying to finish this piece in 2 hours, i.e. one stream. So I can show you the elephant, but I'll do so in a little bit if you don't mind. Now this wood is smelling like freshly cut wood for some reason. It's just like I'd taken a big saw to it. Yeah, I will do, as I say shortly, max out the cake. I don't mind showing you. I'm just working on the wrong ear. Okay, yeah, around there, like that. Okay, yeah. And it's a wonder I'm not sticking my tongue out. I'm concentrating quite a bit on this. And often when I do that, I stick my tongue out. So I look even dafter on stream. That's the colour I'm after. Just slightly. There we go. I'm looking for a sort of a golden brown for this. Okay, now the nose is virtually black, but it's got a shape to it. So, whilst the nose is virtually black, it isn't black. And so, just mark that, and let me mark the bottom of the nose there, and then I will take an eraser and erase the nose carefully. Sorry, you're laughing, I'm laughing, you might be wondering what I'm laughing at. It looks like a little fella wearing a hat. Just at the moment. Now then, so the front of his nose is not, it is in shadow basically, therefore it's darker than the rest of the nose. And whilst it's black, it's not actually black. In fact, you know, the bit that's in the sunlight, so to speak, is quite grey, even though it's black. One of the difficulties sometimes is portraying things like black, because often it isn't. And incidentally, for airbrushing purposes, it's one thing people often struggle with is they see something is black and they want to use black to airbrush it, and often it isn't. It isn't black. In fact, daft as it sounds, sometimes you can use white to make something black, which is kind of a very weird phenomenon, really, when you sort of think about it. But okay, we'll come back to that in a minute if I need any more. So we can now do the top of the nose. Need a little bit more distinguishing between them, but not much. That will do for the moment. And now we need to do just around here where the muzzle comes down. Now, I don't want to cook that line in, so that's probably enough for me to see it on that side, so we will erase down there. Sort of that kind of face. Yeah, maybe, sort of. Okay, that will do. And then this is the cheekbone around there, so we do that. Yeah. Dark fur in just sort of in the eye area around there, and then it's lighter fur around the rest. To about there, yeah, that will do around there. And then we've got so some markings, a little bit of markings across there. bit like the cats in that the fur changes direction. So I'm not doing a lot of texture with this. Don't have time to do it like I did with the cats, which is quite a heavy texture. But I'm going to try and do a little bit of marking and texture marking. We've not got a really big piece, so I can afford to do a little bit in time wise. Actually, it's sort of going to come that way around. There, and I think I can probably erase that side of the face now. I put that down there. So we're coming up to about 35 minutes. This is proving interesting. When you mentioned the nose looking like a little oh, I see, yeah. There's a character, some sort of character on TV or cartoon or something that has that sort of, just had that sort of look. Okay, and then we've got dark flashes coming up there. I'm using a reference picture of this, so I'm kind of copying the reference a little bit. Actually don't need to, I could make this up as I go along really. Okay. Because of course, you know, it doesn't. There's no particular reason why a fox has to look anything like. The eye's a bit small. Okay, I can do without that that side of the muzzle now. Can't turn this over yet because I just can't quite. Yeah, around there. This is coming around the cheekbone. Heading more or less horizontal across to about there. Yeah, and then we're kind of going off the edge like that. Okay, I'm talking to myself. Look at a reference, look at where the hair direction is. Because there is, because of the way I'm doing this, I am doing it with a slight texture. So I've got to get the hair in roughly the right direction. It comes off the eyes, sort of like that. And we go over the top of the eyelids. Is this high-speed fire? Yep, it is indeed high-speed pyrography. I am trying to do this side, this is the totality of the image, in 1 hour, and I'm going to try and do the other side in another hour. And you also like the screen layout? Oh, thank you very much. Seemed a bit unbalanced, and to be honest, I didn't like the webcam sort of hanging out over the edge, so I might be making a few more changes to the layout in a while, but other things I need to do first. Okay. Right, so I want to do just like because the eye's in like a socket area, I want to just darken the fur around the eye. And in the corner here of the eye. Right, so the eye's got to come out a bit small, which is a pity, but there's nothing I can do about it now, unfortunately. I am still on screen. 84 guy, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. Okay, now then. One of the things that, because I've sort of set a time limit on this, I'm trying to rush. And because I'm trying to rush, what I've got to be a bit careful of is that I don't try too hard to go fast, therefore end up slowing myself down. So things like the colouring around here, if I slow down, then I can do it in sort of one pass. If I try and go too fast, then that doesn't work. I have to do 2 or 3 passes, which is actually slower. Now then, the foxes appear to be like cats and like dogs, in that their muzzle hair is very fine short hairs. So I'm trying not to put a lot of texture into this, into the nose. I'm trying to use a fairly flat tool, and little tiny strokes a little bit here, just to give a little bit of variation in colour. But essentially I'm just using flat colour for this, rather than I've got a little bit more hair-like around here. Yes, you are correct, Graham. It is practice. Ultimately, well, there's I guess a stage of knowing what you can get away with doing and what you can not do. There is a stage though of, to get faster, I have to start turning the heat up and working a lot more faster. I'm already, but I mean, in terms of practice, I'm already perhaps working faster than I'd normally be comfortable with doing. But that, you know, by the time I finish this piece, I'll be quite comfortable at working at this speed. It's sort of something you get used to fairly quickly, I'm glad to say, because I do that normally whilst I'm working at slower speeds. I do get used to very quickly get used to using using higher heat and having to work faster. You moved on to the PC edit, yeah. You know, I have the same thing. I prefer using the PC if I'm going to type, because I can touch type, so it's a lot easy. It's a lot easier than one finger typing on an iPad. Right, so. That's just straight over the top. Okay. Try not to draw a line round the outside, a physical line, because of course it's hair, you don't get a single solid line. Again, it's that photographic style, but if I'd drawn a line, if you look at anything, it's got a fuzzy edge basically, and by just making the edge, by just using the sort of the hair, I get that fuzzy edge. So that's going to go like that. Curved lines just around there. I've just realised that this video I might even actually be able to put onto YouTube, because it'll be short enough rather than a 40-hour long video. This one will hopefully only be sort of an hour long. Immortalised for as long as YouTube lets us have free video space. Yeah. Pop-ups on my screen keep catching my eye. And again, being fur, being textured, you know, little markings, slightly darker areas than others aren't really a problem because of course it's fur. It's not a perfect shade. So I now want to get some curves just around here. It's coming out of the eye socket as the fur starts to change direction a little bit up towards the ear. I'll look at that again when I turn it the right way around. Turned it this way because it matches the natural arc of my hand. So again, I get smoother curves by doing that. It's getting dirty. I need to clean the tip. How are we doing for time? Okay, I'm getting close. Okay, now then, one of the things I need to do now is to erase that, what was left of the muzzle really. But it's kind of white fur. Well, I can't do white. White is really fur that, well, is really sort of pyrography that isn't there. So what we can do to simulate that is, first of all, we can do background fur, which is what I'm going to do around here. Yeah, it just sort of goes out from here. Because I'm not doing the rest of the body. All I need to do is just give some of the body hair, so to speak, around the face, so I outline the edge of the face where I'm not going to be doing white fur. And now I just need to hint a little bit more of the muzzle around that sort of area there, just to give you a little bit more of an idea. And of course the brown fur would probably come further down around the muzzle. I just actually hinted it doing so, like that, down there. Now then, two more things to do. I'm just going to give the lower jaw there just a little bit of a brown colour. I'll just knock it back a little bit because it is. It's a bit, a bit further back in the jaw. I also want to just give the eyes a little bit of a colour, because that way they'll appear yellow, or sort of an orangey, slightly orangey colour. And now that. Darken the tips of the ears a little bit. Now the lines originally were quite solid lines just around there, so I'm just fluffing them out a bit. Okay, now I'm going to do is get my scalpel, which I've already just tucked away, and we're now going to actually what I am going to do is I am going to darken this around here. Turn that back on. A little bit more heat for this. just occurred to me that I'm probably not going to get the density of scratches that I'm after, so if I darken it down a little bit, it won't look quite as silly as it might otherwise do. Sorry, I keep catching the camera occasionally. Okay, now we'll try scratching that. I need to put this flat here, and so we're going to come not fantastically happy with that. Needs a different technique really. Okay, but we'll know about that for next time. That's one side done. Shape needs a bit more practice, but that's one side done. Ears, not as happy as I would like to be, but we shall come back to that if we have time. So, where's my next reference? Okay, we're working like that. So, yeah. Eyes are closed. It's asleep. Then we'll put the closed eyes in first. Almost always, if you can't get eyes right, then you end up not having a particularly good image. And then, yeah, we're gonna, whilst I'm gonna effectively make this nighttime, your eyes still expect a little bit of shadow to help you. So I'm putting it in. So even in a dark scene, you often still need shadow. Okay, and as this is a dark scene, what I'm going to do is I'm going to effectively just outline this with a sort of a cloudy, fluffy outside edge. Of course, I'm making this up as I go along, so I don't actually know what this is going to look like. But it's kind of like intended to be like if it was in the dark and you just shone a light on this fox. So the fox would be lit up, but the background would still be really dark. Don't you just hate it when a game AI? Oh dear, yeah, it can be really frustrating. Quite a few games like that, and it's kind of like I've had I'll make up the scenario, but it's been a game like a go. You're getting really hungry, eat soon or you'll die. You're getting hungry, eat soon, and it spends so much time telling you that you and ignoring the fact that you're saying please eat this bit of food. It sort of ties itself in a loop. So it won't take an input until it said the message, and when it said the message it just says it again, and it's kind of, I've just spent 10 minutes trying to get you to eat and now you've killed me. I tend not to like to play games like that. I have played games like that, as you say, they are really irritating. I can turn this up a little bit because I want it to be dark. So if it goes dark quite quickly, that's not really a problem. In fact, going dark quickly is an advantage. Anybody that's watching that doesn't normally watch me, blimey, I am perhaps more quieter than I normally am because I am concentrating quite a lot. I'm trying to see if I can get this pyrography done, this side done in under an hour or thereabouts, so that I've done both sides in an hour. A bit I just went oh blimey about there is my air conditioner, which is behind me, has obviously just reached temperature because the compressor turned off, which kind of surprised me, mainly because it doesn't normally get that, doesn't manage to normally cool the room down enough to do that. Now this is kind of a variation on outlining a character if you were doing it sort of illustration or comic book style. So I am kind of outlining the character. Try not to do it with a solid line though. Again, it's for, you don't often get solid lines around animals and things in nature. Now at the end of this I'm going to come back and widen this a little bit into sort of a vaguely oval brown area around it. But just for the moment this will do. ETS? Oh, ETS 2. You had me worried then. I thought, have I missed a release? In some ways, the bit that annoys me about the sleeping in ETS 2 is it's kind of like if I was falling asleep driving a truck, you know what I'd do? Is I'd pull up to the side of the road. I wouldn't carry on trying to drive. Now, granted, it may well be illegal for drivers to sleep at the edge of the road, but it's kind of like, which would you rather have me do? Cause an accident or have a slight rest? I don't mean a big long rest, but so I do get a bit annoyed with that. I've got better at managing it though. And of course, if you realise that the game has calculated the delivery times, taking into account if you need rest, then it makes it a little bit easier. And of course, if you remember that some ferry crossings also reset the sleep timer. Right, so we've got an outline there. We've got some dark, sort of dark area just around here. It's kind of like a shadow. Let's say there's moonlight from the left, so I've got a bit of a shadow going on around here, around the side of his face. And we've got his nose basically in there, so let's see if I can do ears. Of course, now I've got to make the ears a little bit darker than that edge. But it's not the same one as on the other side, so this one's got darker ears. No, the train doesn't, that's right. Sometimes it's better therefore to take the ferry, especially from England across, rather than going on the Channel Tunnel. Of course the tunnel only takes about 20 minutes, so the drivers wouldn't ever get to sleep on that. Okay, now then the inside of the ears are darker. I'm not going to try and put hair into this one. Well, I might put the odd bit of hair in, just the odd line, but essentially all I'm going to do is give a slight outline to the ear. That's one ear done there. This one, so what I'm attempting to do, anybody who's just joined the stream wondering quite what I'm doing, especially since I'm so quiet, which is unusual for me, is this is in the order of speed pyrography. I am attempting to complete 2 pieces of pyrography in 2 hours. Now that needs to be a little bit darker if that's going to show up, so we will do so. Okay, there. Now then, we're going to come down around the face and the nose, so that is going to want to be a little bit darker around there. And it goes off like that. And of course we've got nice dark eyes, so let's just apply a little bit of dark fur coming away from the corners like that. Down to his nose. I'll do the same thing on this side here. So we sort of really telegraph where the muzzle comes down, like that. In this particular case, we've got quite dark areas just coming off the corner of the eyes. We'll deal with them again in a minute. And then now we just apply light fur markings. As we just come down the nose here, these will be very light. Don't really want to apply much texture on the nose. It might have markings, but it'll be quite light texture, because of course the fur is, as I mentioned earlier, the fur is very fine. And then we start to apply texture as we come away from the eyes. Now I'm being a little bit faster on the face here because I've got the whole body to do as well. Sorry, I'm starting to work off frame, so I'm going to be careful with that. I apologise. Okay. Now the white bit of the muzzle will show up in a little bit once we do the tail, which is wrapped around the wrapped around here. But you can sort of see what I'm going to do is darken this area down a little bit. It's a bit bright. Now that will sort of look like the side of the fox. There. Now we've got the tail. So the tail has got quite light fur, so I am just going to do some quick light marks. Around there, which is, yeah. Tail's got quite long fur, so using longish shudder strokes. In order to sort of represent it a little bit. And we're doing about another 20 minutes, okay. So now then okay. It's a bit warm, turn that down a bit. Oh yeah, thank you very much for that comment. Sorry, I'm not sure when you said E. I'm kind of really concentrating on this. Obviously it's practice, so once I get a bit better at practicing, then I can obviously interact a little bit better than I'm doing now. And also, once I get to know how long it takes to do something like this, of course, then if I don't do it in one stream, I still know I've taken, you know, like 2 hours to do it. It just meant that the rest of the time on the stream I've been talking, and therefore, you know, it's all right, so to speak. Yeah, so it's kind of right. One of the things I want to get in here is kind of his back legs wrapped. Is he sort of curled around a little bit? We're gonna a little bit of fur that sort of seems to be in an odd direction. It's actually, of course, just the leg. Now, I'm being quite rough really with this wood because of trying to do it quickly, so I am actually creating more texture than I expect it to do, to be honest. So this is getting sort of quite a rough surface, relatively speaking. But that's okay because it is helping with the the texture of fur. Parties is here. This is crazy. What's crazy? Parties is here, and welcome to the studio this evening. Speed pyrography. I am trying to complete both sides of this, both images, in a normal stream, which is about 2 hours. And we've in theory about 10 minutes left on the 2 hours, although I did there was about 5 or 10 minutes at the start where I was setting up and didn't quite start exactly as I started the OBS running. Okay, thank you very much. I am working faster than normal, so it's a different style, slightly different style to what I'd normally work with. But pyrography, I'll tell you a little bit about it while I'm doing this, because I can do whilst I'm working. Pyrography itself is quite an old art form. The word itself, pyrography, originally has Greek roots. So it goes. The word comes from sort of fairly ancient Greek words, but whether it actually goes back as far as ancient Greece, I'm not sure, or whether somebody just made up the words using the Greek roots. But quite literally it translates as writing with fire. Pyro being the fire and the graphy actually meaning writing. But I generally prefer to translate it more, and it suits it better if I describe it as painting with heat. So what I've got in my hand here is an electrically heated tool. It's just a flat blade of metal through which electricity is passed, and that causes it to heat up, kind of like the electric element in a kettle does when you pass electricity through it. And it gets hot, and when it's in contact with the surface of the wood, it makes that surface of the wood turn brown. The more heat I apply, or the more quantity of heat I apply, I hold it longer, or I turn up the heat, or I go over something more than once, all of which increase the quantity of heat, and therefore it goes darker. You can do pyrography and all sorts of things. This is birch plywood, which is an excellent wood for doing pyrography on, because it's both very white, and the whiter the wood, the more range of shades of brown you can get on it. I often describe that as colours, but that's kind of a very loose, it's a monochrome art form, so it's different shades of brown. Although sometimes your eye will see colours, so if you look at something and think you see yellow, you are seeing yellow. It's just your eye is fooling you. Birch plywood works really well because it's light, a light wood. The plywood works really well because it helps to stop warping, and also it's got a very nice the rings, the grain of the grain of the wood with the ring, where there are rings in wood, they don't really show up a great deal. As you can see on this particular piece, you can hardly see them. And also one of the nice things about that is they don't turn a different colour when you apply pyrography like they would on some woods. Pine, for example, is notorious for doing that. The wood will turn, the rings will turn a sort of a yellowy colour, and the wood that's behind it will turn, or between the rings, will go brown. So the rings tend to stand out more, which is not always what you're after. So different woods though, slightly different properties. Sometimes you work with them, sometimes you avoid them. You can also apply pyrography to other materials as well. Leather, for example, it's often used on gourds. It can be used on bone, and in sort of, I'll say, Victorian times, it was often done on ivory, although these days ivory is illegal to do that sort of thing with. You can actually do it on paper and card as well, although it's somewhat harder to do on those substances because it turns colour really quickly. But you can do it. Thicker the card the better, or thicker the paper the better. But you can. It is possible to do, as I illustrated the other night. Sorry, let me catch up on stream. Isaac, dig. That's not appropriate language on your first comment, especially on entering a stream. If you expect... Okay, thank you very much. You've just mentioned you effectively apologised at the bottom, so thank you for that. Otherwise you were about to get ejected. How much would such a cat cost? This isn't a cat, this is a fox. Okay. And I haven't actually costed it out, but I am expecting this to probably be in the order of about £20, and it's two-sided. But if you're talking about a cat like a cat like that, that's a bit different, because there's something like about 10 or 12 hours of work in this, which I'm holding off stream. So that's quite a bit more expensive. This is kind of me. I'll try and get this back on stream. I've knocked the camera, haven't I? That's why. This is actually me trying to do things faster. It means work what I would call, or an artist might call, working a little bit more loose. Which is effectively is a slightly different style, but to what I would do. But it's an idea, just to help make it a little bit more affordable. Seems a reasonable piece. Thank you very much. It's kind of always difficult to know quite how much to price things, but it is based generally on the amount of time. Clozo Gonzo, you asked me what tool I'm using. It's an electrically heated tool. If you're actually after the manufacturer of this is called Razor Tip. It's a Razor Tip SSD10, which is a dual pen system. The pens are separate. They just unplug, as in this particular case of this one does the tip itself. And the controller, which I will show you when I finished if you would like to see it, but is essentially just converts mains electricity into a low safe voltage. So this pen operates on about 1.5 to 2 volts, somewhere in that sort of area, and the controller basically adjusts how much electricity is fed to the pen, which controls how much heat the pen generates, and each pen is different. I've got another pen attached to it here where I have to turn it down as much as I possibly can, otherwise it would actually almost burn through the wood without trying. And by the way, I do say, whilst I say burn, there's no flames involved. It just chars it so much that it will actually cut through. Clozo Gonzo. I will practice that a little bit. Thank you very much for your comment, and you as well, Isaac Dig, for saying so. Do I do that? It does tend to be that seems to be what I do most of. As you saw the cat, I'll show you another cat in a minute, but and some other things, because we're quite close to having completed this. I've got another cat here, but and we finished an elephant last night, so that's kind of done now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken around the outside a little bit more, just to widen this dark area. So this is an example. I've turned the heat up, and this is an example now of really I haven't turned it up a great deal, but if I go slow, you can see it's light. You don't get much of a mark. If I slow down and then go over it again like I've just done, I get more dark area. Now I don't want to turn it up too much, which is what I could do to make this go fast, but what it will do is if I turn it up too much, it'll actually dig into the wood, and I actually want it to be quite smooth, a surface, rather than have sort of little digs in it, as though you'd been hitting it with a hammer or something. Because of course the idea Isaac Dig, thank you very much for following. That's very kind of you. I do appreciate that. Partes is here. Does it smell bad? No, actually. Well, I suppose that's a matter of opinion, to be honest. I don't find it smells bad. Generally speaking, there's not a lot of smell. Okay. You get most of the smell you'll get when you're doing work is, it's kind of like wood on a hot day. If you've ever been in a room that's got lots of wood on a hot day, it has a smell to it. A warm, I describe it as a warm wood smell. That's generally speaking about the only smell you get from the wood. What I'm doing at the moment though is I'm making this go quite dark, and you might be seeing wisps of smoke coming up, and it's it has a smell. It has a smell of burning wood. I find, certainly on these woods like birch here, I find that a relatively pleasant smell. It's a bit like a smell you get after a match has been blown out. If you're familiar with matches and have ever struck a match, not the initial sort of chemicalish sort of smell, but the one that you get after it's burnt for a little while and you blow it out. But it's not particularly strong at all. There's not a lot of, as you can see, there's not a lot of smoke coming off. There's not a lot of smell to this. Now I want just some. Okay. As soon as I've done this, I'll show you some other pieces. I just want to do the final bits on this, which is really just to extend this darkness that's around the sleeping fox. So it's meant to sort of give an indication of it being night time. Yeah, it's kind of a technique I learned relatively recently by accident, and actually from using this very tip that I've got on here, and the cat that I showed you a minute ago, that's the one I found it out on. Although there's a couple of things that go into it. There's it's done using, well, using the edge of this tool. I generally use the tip, and it creates like a groove, a V groove in the wood, and essentially it applies pyrography just to one side of the V groove when you do that, which gives you sort of a light dark effect in just one stroke, and it looks remarkably like fur, which is rather useful, really. And if you then turn the piece around and do the other side of the V, it gets quite dark, which is what I've done with the cat. But I only found that out by accident. The other thing about pyrography is when you heat, sometimes when you heat wood up with an edge like that, the brown whatever it is almost like well, it is sort of like a liquid, and so you can push it around a little bit, and that creates streaks, which is partly what's gone on there as well. So it's those sorts of streaks make a fur-like effect. So again, something there. Now, somebody asked me when did I start pyrography? About 5 years ago now. 4. So, well, to be honest, I can't really remember. I started art in quotes. I used to like art as a kid. But I sort of went into other creative areas, shall we say, as I got older. But about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted a new PC, and I decided that what I'd actually do is water cool the PC, because I was fed up with fan noise. And I decided that I actually wanted a unique case, and the easiest way of getting a unique case was to decorate it, shall we say, in some way. And what I decided to do was airbrush it. I've been interested in airbrushing for years. Never done, well, I'd done some using the wrong tools when I was probably when I was a teenager. Luckily back then I recognised I was doing it wrong. It wasn't an inherent inability, I was just using the wrong tools. And so about 5 years ago I tried, I got a whole setup of airbrushing stuff, and built my case, airbrushed the case. It now looks like an exaggerated aquarium. Being a water-cooled PC, it seems sort of appropriate. And having done that and got into airbrushing, one of the things I got into and I really enjoyed doing in airbrushing is black and white monochrome work, which is kind of like this. And looking at monochrome airbrushing on like YouTube, I came across, because YouTube does things that are like what you ask for, I came across pyrography and got really interested from looking at it to try. And I literally then went out and got the kit that I've got here and started. So somewhere between sort of 4 and 5 years ago is when I started, but I've done more pyrography since I started streaming, which is sort of around April, to beginning of April, than I've done in the past 3 years. So I'm getting a lot of practice in now. Right. So it's not as bad as slaughtering glass together. Not quite sure I understand what you're getting at there, Clozo Gonzo. And it may be that I am, because I also do glass engraving, that I'm kind of mixing up what you're trying to say with what's in my own mind. Have I got good PC specs? Against a PC today, no, not really. But 5 years ago, it was about the best. I won't say the best you could get, but it was a really good spec about 5 years ago. It's still not, other than the graphics card, there's still not a great deal wrong with it these days. You know, it's a 5-year-old graphics card, so having said which, it's still running 3 HD monitors quite happily without a problem, and actually 2 HD monitors and one better than HD monitor, because I've got a Cintiq, a Wacom Cintiq 26-inch screen here, so it's quite a large screen. It's running all 3, and it's streaming. It's 2.4 gig CPU in it, but it's running at stock speed at the moment. I have had that running over 4 gigs, but it generated a fair bit of heat, and I don't need it running that fast most of the time, so it's sitting at stock at the moment. But we have finished, by the way, so I've done it in about 2 hours. So yeah, to keep up these days, it probably wants a faster processor, and it probably wants a new graphics card. But you know, it'd be nice to put a 980 or something similar in it. But I'm more likely to build a new one than that, and you know, put a faster CPU in it. Still an i7. I think they're still one of the better processors. Anyway, this is a door hanger. Let me move the camera a little bit, so because it's quite close. I'm not zoomed in; it's just quite close. So we've got a door hanger. I decided I'd try and want to use door hangers for you know, sleeping and waking. So we've got a sleeping fox on this side, and what we've got on this side is we've got a waking fox, or a fox that's awake. I think the sleeping one is a bit better, but I think I might actually, whilst although I've finished, I'm actually just going to do a bit more on this. Let's I don't like the ears, so I'm just going to do a little bit of work on the ears here. I did try a technique on this which works quite well on the cat, but not when you've got a lot of hair, which was to use a sharp knife and scrape hair into the ear. Wasn't a success. It works quite nicely, but it wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be. So I'm just going to take a little bit of extra time. Then I'll show you some of the other pieces. But I think that's I am really pleased with these, because it's speed pyrography. I've never done it before. I've done 2 pieces, one on each side, in 2 hours. There we go. If I'd have had a bit more time, I think I should have I'll tell you what. There we go. I just extend the body out a little bit more like that there. That makes it look a bit better, I think. Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. Why use heat? Does it ever fade? And happy 2015 as well, to those people celebrating the 4th of July. Why use heat? Because that's the medium I choose to use, to be honest. I mean, you can do this with paint, you can do it with a pen. I like this effect of using heat to colour the wood. Does it ever fade? If you put this in bright sunlight, it will change. Will it fade? Generally wood itself, when you put it in bright sunlight, for example, will change colour. Birch, for example, will go yellower. So the contrast will vary. Some of the dark areas will lighten up. Gustian, thank you very much for following me in the studio. That is most fantastic of you. Thank you. Some of the dark areas will lighten, and some of the other areas generally will go yellower. The contrast will reduce a little bit. You can do things. I prefer to leave the wood unfinished, but you can put, for example, a UV stabilized varnish over the top, and then because the varnish effectively removes the UV, which is what changes the colour of the wood and the pyrography, then you'll maintain it a lot better. But otherwise, no, it doesn't. Fantastic. I mean, if you're hanging this on a door, it's not in bright sunlight, then you would be okay for very many years. It will, over sort of a couple of months, it'll yellow a little bit, but not much, and it tends to sort of sit with a little bit of yellow on it, shall we say. But because this is kind of sepia toned, it's a brown. That yellowing tends to make the thing look a little bit nicer. There's quite a high contrast at the moment, but with that little bit of yellow, it just softens it slightly, and I actually personally think it looks a lot better. Could do with the door lang on the studio. Well, the studio door's open, so for my wife would have to come in to see it on the door, and therefore would already have found out I was streaming. So but it's an interesting one to do. I don't know quite what I'd do with it for it. I don't know, a camera on one side, camera and a microphone perhaps on one side, and I don't know, something on the other, maybe just blank on the other. Yeah, as Gray has answered there, Klazonga. I am not about to start to sing the song. Yes, I will do so in a moment, Klazonga, and show you some of the other pieces. Best Dog NA. Yes, is the actual answer. As Gray said, really depends. Generally speaking, I'm not that good at freehanding straight away with a tool, and I don't really like doing it because effectively it's really hard to correct mistakes. So if I've tried going in with a tool and I've got a mark that I don't want, you can't erase it. You can hide it, or you can try doing things like scraping it, but that changes the surface texture and it still stays visible even if you go over it again. I mean, even like here, I've just gone over the ears, and yet the texture, because it was scraped underneath, it's a slightly different texture. So it still stays visible. So generally speaking, I like to go do with a pencil, or if I've got a, if I was doing a pet portrait, for example, I'd probably take a print out the picture that I want it to do on paper, and then use transfer paper. Effectively trace the outline, the major outline, because there's two things about pet portraits. That is, the outline is quite important. That's how a lot of people recognise the pet. So getting that right is one of the key things. And the other is the eyes, the eye positions, and the shape of the eyes. So it helps to give yourself the exact positioning from the photograph. But it is literally just an outline, and generally speaking, as I'm working, I do erase the outline, because you don't want to go pyrography over either pencil or transfer medium, because if you do that, it kind of cooks it in and you can see it, and it doesn't look very good. So it's kind of a mix of all three, really. It really depends on what it is. Whilst I sort of did the outline of the fox here, where the leg is, where the tail is, the position of the nose, was all sort of done freehand, just with what was there. Partes is here. Thank you also for following. That is very kind of you. So again, kind of mix. Not very forgiving for mistakes. No, well, okay. To correct a mistake, there's kind of 2 or 3 things you can do. The pyrography sits on the surface. So if you remove the surface, then with a scalpel, for example, you can scrape, and you can scrape the darkness off. You can take sandpaper and use sandpaper. Don't ever use wet and dry. By the way, people think you can do that because it's really fine, but actually what it does, it leaves a dull grey residue in the wood. So sandpaper will take the surface off, but either of those two change the surface texture. Scraping it, depending on how you scrape it, will either smooth it or roughen it, depending on which way the grain goes. Sandpaper usually smooths it, and if you've changed the surface texture when there's two different surface textures next to each other, if you've tried to create a smooth colour, and I haven't particularly here, then there will be a difference in the colour. You'll see the line, you'll see the edge. So it works sometimes. If I'm doing a background like this, for example, which is meant to be not very smooth but sort of slightly textured, you're less likely to see it. I have tried, and I've not had as much success, but I've not tried really hard, to use isopropyl alcohol, a solvent, because this is like a varnish on the top, and you can bring some of the colour off, but the isopropyl alcohol gets into the wood and raises the grain, which again has changed the surface texture. So I didn't find it particularly successful. The way in which I usually correct mistakes is, let's say I just made an area slightly darker than I wanted it to be. What I do is darken everything else around it, and basically just darken the whole picture very slightly, or enough of an area so you don't see that darkness, the mistake that I made, and it just hide it basically. And because pyrography works by contrast more than absolute colour, so you'll tend to see this area in here along the face as white, but it's not white. It's actually a light brown colour. I've applied pyrography, I've applied heat to it. It's a light brown. Because of the contrast with what's around it, you're seeing it as white. You're probably seeing the nose as almost black, but it's a dark brown. Again, it's the contrast, it's the darkest thing around, so you tend to think of it as black. So it's playing games with the way in which your eye sees things. Now then, yes, that's right, Partition, a bit like toast. It's and if you try it with toast and then you put it back in the toaster, if you try that, or one thing to do with toast, if you squeeze it slightly and put it in the toast, well, the bread, and put it in the toaster, the squeezed bit will be a different colour to the bit that wasn't squeezed. Or if you scraped it and put it back in, the rest will be darker and the scraped bit will be lighter when it comes out. And so you've kind of got to get the heat just in that scraped bit. And that, of course, is what the tool is kind of doing. I'll show you some other pieces and I'll carry on answering some of the questions. So, you saw this pussycat, which is Junior, and I'll leave that one here as well. Let me move the fox. What we've got here is another one, which is Felix. So Junior and Felix, they both live here. Junior occasionally appears on the stream. Felix very rarely does. We actually have 3, but he's black and white. He's a real dark brown and white, which you think is black until you see the two together. And our other cat is a female. It's a tabby. But she never comes upstairs. So I think she's appeared on stream once because my wife brought her up. But I haven't done a piece of her yet. So there's those two. Just while you're looking at those, are there different tips for the heat pen? Or yes to both, actually. Questions. I'm saying yes to a lot of things. There are different tools. PeasDog145, thank you for following the studio. That is most excellent of you. Thank you very much. So here's a couple of tips. This one on the left is the one that I've been using all evening. It's called a flat shader. Shader because it's easier to create shade with. That's shading is not as in sunlight shade, it's in a shade of colour, a consistent colour. And flat because it's flat. To be honest, bit of an obvious thing. This is generally called a writing tip. It's a little bit like a sort of a flat pencil, a rectangular pencil. So it's quite you can produce quite nice calligraphic or calligraphy with this, because dragging it that way, it's wider than dragging it that way. It can be used to create lines as well. It's sort of like writing with a ballpoint pen, but not quite. You can get tips that have a steel ball welded to the end, so it does work like a ballpoint pen. Another one I've got here, this also is a flat shader, slightly different shape, it's longer and wider as well, and that just lets me cover wider areas basically than this one. So, but you can still do detail with either. You don't have to use the whole area of the pen, it doesn't have to be flat like this. I quite often use this one on its side. I get a slightly better effect with that. It suits my style of working. But as I was both the small and this large one. Tonight I was using it tipped up like this. So I'm just using the tip of the pen. And that's what helps create this groove-like effect, or the fur-like effect, is using it tipped up like this. It's not got a sharp edge, but it's square, so it's a bit like using a knife edge, but it's a blunt knife. Another one I've got here. This is called a spoon shader. And the reason it's called a spoon shader is basically because it's still a shader. It's meant for creating large areas, but it's a bit like the bowl of a spoon. This is supposed to be easier for beginners to create large areas of colour with consistently, because of the way in which it preheats the wood as you go across, because of the spoon shape. not all of it is in contact with the wood. And it kind of preheats it, so when you come back it's easier to create a consistent colour. It's generally speaking a flat shader, there's no preheat effect, so you have to be quite accurate with it, which don't have to be as accurate with this tip here. I've got another pen here, for example. Let me put that shader away just for a moment, and I'll catch up with chat in a minute. Unfortunately, you asked a question with a long answer. This is a knife blade, and it is a knife blade. It's not fantastically sharp, but it is a thin blade, and it can be used like that on wood to create cuts in the wood, and they're very fine cuts. Finer than the sort of markings that are here. It's quite often used to create feathers and the marks on feathers, because they need to be really, really fine marks. But you can also use a tool like this, for example, on plastic. So people who do airbrushing, people who do stenciling on walls, generally use a plastic called mylar to create a cutout through which they will stencil or spray. And you can use a tool like this attached to a calligraphy machine to heat the tool up, and it'll cut very easily through the plastic. You can also use it on things like plastic models to cut them off, or to do a little bit of work on it and reshape the plastic a little bit. But you are also right, you can get wire tips which will attach to the same pen that I was using. Have I got some here? I think I have. Okay, I'll just get one out. I don't often use these, but it's just a piece of wire bent to whatever shape you want it to use it for. I mean, this, for example, is quite good if you actually want to create that U-shaped shape, just to press it down. But you can turn it over and use it like a writing tip or a light to create lines. If you're good, and I'm not that good yet, you can use it like that to create quite a wide area. So a bit like you'd use a shader, but it takes a lot more skill to do that. And I'll just get one out, but essentially it's just a bit of wire like that, special resistance wire, but then it's just you just bend it to whatever shape you want. If you want a Christmas tree shape, you bend it to a Christmas tree shape. I'll just put those away, and I'll show you another piece. I'll show you the one we've just finished actually, yesterday. That's a piece which I named it yesterday. Salute to Sunset. So the idea of the piece is it's an elephant, obviously, with its trunk up. It's an African savannah, and I don't know if this is an African or an Indian elephant, I'm afraid, but it's meant to be an African savannah. It's almost sunset, well, it's almost sundown as opposed to sunset, so you've got a really dark red distant sky. It's getting quite dark, so there. Let me catch up on what people have been saying, because I have a tendency while I'm talking not to read chat. Best Doug, any tips heating evenly? Depends on the tip, but you're right. There are some tips, and I had a shader out which I changed. It was a bit like this one, but wider, and it actually had some cold or some hot spots on it, and I had some problems using that because it had hot spots. So yes, you can take advantage of them if you know where they are, and you can actually see them when the tool's on, because if you turn it up a little bit, you can see the metal bluing, and where it's cooler, and it's sort of a silver where it's hotter. Is it the other way around? I can't remember, but you can actually see it. I had a problem, which is why I switched out for this one when I was doing this work. So yeah, you can take effect of it in that way. Sir Derp Whitey, yeah, heard that one before. What am I doing? I think we are just going to do that. Get rid of him. There's no need for that. Gustian, thank you very much for that compliment. It makes me smile. Thank you very much. Okay, so Derp Whitey. Okay. I didn't find him funny, which is why he's now gone. Thank you very much, Clozo Gonzo. I'll show you. I've got some other things I can show you in a second. And Partes is here. Thank you also. Clozo Gonzo. I've not tried that yet. Yes, you can. You can stain the wood. I wouldn't stain. Depends on what you mean by stain. If you're using things like inks, yes. I wouldn't use wood stain as such, because it's a harsh chemical, and when you apply pyrography to it, you're applying heat. You can get some very noxious chemicals coming off, gases. But something like airbrush paint, for example, solvent paint. What I'm trying to think of is like a felt tip pen, but you can get some which are dye based. Or ink based. So yes, you can apply that either over the top of the pyrography, or you can apply it and then put pyrography over the top of the ink. You get different effects. If you put it over the top, then it's Scott the Bot. Thank you for following. That's fantastic of you. Thank you very much. I was saying, oh yeah, if you apply it over the top, then it sits on the top, and it has the effect of colouring the pyrography and sitting on the surface, and the colour's a bit more vibrant in that way. If you put it on the wood first and then apply pyrography over the top, then you're getting the brown on top of the dye, which changes the colour of it, and it also puts like a glaze over the top, so it can make it look dull. Might be the effect you're after, but either work. I haven't tried them yet. It's just something to try in the future. At the moment I'm having fun just playing pyrography. Graya, thank you very much for dropping in. No problem. Have a very good evening and a good sleep and good evening. Interesting you say that, Best Doug. Let me just show you a couple of other pyrographic pieces, and then I'll come back to that. There's a practice piece that I did. It's practice because it's on hardboard, so this wood's cheaper to be honest. So that was done as a practice piece. Which obviously, as it says there, it's an Avro Lancaster. Now I do also use this as an illustration of a mistake, and it's a really big mistake, which I'm guessing that unless you've been in my stream before, you've not heard this, but you probably won't, unless you've been in the stream, you probably won't be able to see what the mistake is. So I'll tell you in a moment. I'll come back to it and I'll tell you what the mistake is. But here's another practice piece which I actually haven't finished yet. But that was just again, it's on hardboard, which is cheaper to practice on than birch plywood. and a little bit easier to get to be honest as well. That's about it for pyrography, but the mistake that's on this one is you can see the propellers. In real life, if you ever look at a plane in flight with propellers, you'll never see the propellers. You only see them when the engines are running in two circumstances. If you ever take a photograph, you can sometimes stop them like that, or if you take a video and you look at the video, because the way the video's taken, it can sometimes appear to stop the propellers. So this piece, I've made the mistake of showing the propellers. So it's more like a copy of a photograph than a copy of a real scene. But there again, being the artist, I can cheat. So all I do is I say, that's not a mistake, that's intentional. Because this plane has just had engine failure on all 4 engines. It's run out of fuel, so the propellers are stopped, and that's why it's coming in for an emergency landing. So I can cheat some mistakes that you make, you can get away with. Love the frame. Yeah, that itself was an experiment just to see if I could do that, and of course it looks like a frame. So that was, yeah, I was practicing playing, trying it out. I've even got the joins in and the corners between the bits of wood. And incidentally, I was talking about putting pyrography over pencil. If you take a look at the corners, you can see the pencil marks that I didn't erase and should have done. This is where I learned not to put pyrography over pencil marks, because you can see them there being drawn on, but it's a practice piece, so you don't see it from a distance, but the frame itself, it has quite a nice 3D effect when you look from a distance, which is I find quite pleasing. That's not, yeah, it's a big mistake, but that's why, you know, kind of why I explain it. It wouldn't always work, wouldn't that, as an explanation? But you know, it's a way of hiding the mistake. But of course, the other reason I often mention that is a lot of people are afraid, for example, to stream, or they're afraid to show their pieces that they might do because they've made mistakes. And if they do show the piece, they point out the mistakes, and the point about me showing this is a big mistake on it. Most people can't see it. So I don't. Okay, thank you. So you know, that's just an illustration of the fact that you don't be afraid, and don't tell people about the mistakes before they spot them themselves. Did you purposely put the texture on the wood frame? A bit of both. It's mainly how it came out. It's really hard to do really consistent, for me. It's really hard to do really consistent colour all the way across. It takes a lot of practice, which I'm getting, but it's a bit of both. And just the final thing, and I've just been reminded what the time is. Best Doug NA mentioned seeing a 3D carving with pyrography on it. It was interesting because before we did the pyrography, I did that, which is a carving. It's a relief carving rather than true 3D. But one of the things that we were discussing on the stream is whether or not actually to apply pyrography to this. Maybe just a small amount to do something like colour this mountain in, and possibly put an eye into the dragon, because this is a dragon. But that was just one of the things that was being discussed. I haven't really decided yet. I do like wood natural, so I'm not that sure, but it's an idea, and it might get done. I might leave it like this for a few months and then apply a bit of pyrography just for something different. Anyway, Gray has disappeared for the evening. It's 11 p.m. here in the UK. I've actually gone on quite a bit longer than I normally do. I normally stop at about 10 p.m. an hour ago, and I've now spent about 30 minutes talking to you guys. I started a little bit late, and I with the door hanger, which is what I was trying to see if I could do that in 2 hours, which I did. I'm glad to say I succeeded. So it's given me sort of confidence to try some more pieces like this, perhaps with instead of just working like with the elephant, which was it'll take as long as it takes. This was done with the intention of it only taking 2 hours to do the whole thing. So you know, you to pick the subject, I guess, and pick the style to match the time available. But it was an interesting challenge. Thank you very much, Klazonga. Gonzo. I apologise. I will get that right one of these days, but I will get it right. I'll try. So what I'm going to do is say that unfortunately I'm going to close the stream. I'm not going to do any more pyrography tonight, and in fact tomorrow I think we move on to scraperboard. But if there's anybody that is watching would like to obviously be notified when I stream next, which will be tomorrow, then I encourage you to follow me, as a lot of these excellent people have done this evening, and thank you all very much for doing that. You're also welcome, if you're not particularly wanting Twitch to email you, you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. The details will be on the end plate and below the stream window, but it's at Zaragonart. And as I'm fond of saying, I tweet when I go live, not when I have breakfast, so you're quite okay there. Thank you very much, Gonzo, for your understanding. Or if you just want to try and catch me tomorrow evening, I generally start streaming 8 p.m. in the UK, 1900 hours GMT. Or if you can't, don't feel like asking Google what time that is in your own time zone, wherever that might be. It's approximately 3 hours ago. It was 8 p.m. in the UK, but that time tomorrow night. I may well stream tomorrow afternoon, depending on what things are going on here in the house and family events and things. But if I do stream tomorrow afternoon, Gonzo, thank you also for following. That is really fantastic of you. I do appreciate everybody who does it. Thank you. I'll be doing some of this. Technically this is called chainmail. I just call it jewellery because if I say chainmail, most people think of armour. I don't do armour. Mainly because I don't know how to, but this isn't very good armour. It's more pretty. So I'll be making some chains tomorrow afternoon, if I'm streaming tomorrow afternoon. So a little test piece, so just practicing, but something different. If I do that, that's around 2-3 p.m. in the UK, which would have been about 9 hours ago. Anyway guys, gotta go, bedtime. See you all later, and thank you for watching this evening.